on this episode of the People of Pearland podcast.
But generally in the public service. So worked back home in Northern Ireland, worked in England, and my last job before I moved to the United States in 2017 was to run a small island just 7 miles off the coast of France. It's British, but not part of the United Kingdom.
Stay tuned for more. Welcome, everyone, to another great episode of the People of Pearland podcast. I'm your host, Josh Lee, and we have my co-host here,
Joe Calderon,
and a very, very special guest, Victor Brownlees, our assistant city manager for the city of Pearland. Welcome to our little podcast.
Thank you, Josh. Glad to be here.
We're so excited to have you here. Have we interviewed anybody from the city manager's office?
We haven't, and we've been talking about this one for a bit. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. No offense to the other city managers, but you're by far the most interesting. I kid. Sorry,
we have a little nickname going for the three of us now.
Oh, no.
Pick this up.
No. What?
The Tres Hombres.
Oh, I like it.
All right. That's
I
good.
even have ZZ Top as my ringtone for LaGrange, right?
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. I was now I'm thinking we need to do a Three Amigos.
Three Amigos.
That's
right.
Yeah.
that was suggested. But
Yeah.
I prefer the Tres Hombres because I like ZZ Top.
That's really good. We can make Ron Chevy Chase.
Oh man, great movie.
Yeah, I know. It's actually my favorite movie
Right.
of all time.
Yes.
I don't know why, but Steve Martin and Martin Short, like you just put them together.
They're superb.
Yeah.
Magical.
Yeah.
So you're an assistant city manager here with the city of Pearland. How long have you been here now? It's been just
So
over a year?
Just over a year and a month. I started at the end of October 2023.
Yeah.
So
Came to us from Baytown.
that's right.
So thank you, Baytown. I know you take some of our employees sometime, but we appreciate the swap there. How has your first year been here? What things that have surprised you, or just an overall punctuation of your experience? What's it been like for Victor here?
So I have to admit I have enjoyed it thoroughly. It's in so many places you go, it's about the people. And I found everybody so welcoming, both at work and outside of work as well. So we moved here actually a year ago. My goodness, a year ago today. We actually
Really?
moved. Yes. We just realized that.
Happy anniversary then.
Thank you. So yeah, we found it so welcoming. There's no doubt about it. The pace is fast
Yeah.
here within the city, and I think that's probably a shock to the system for some people. I like that. I like the variety and actually the fact that people do it with such good humor.
Yeah, because I think
Right.
if you can't joke about it, you're in
Right.
trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we've talked about that a lot, and we've heard that from a lot of people that we as an organization, and this is probably an overgeneralization, but consider ourselves a pretty progressive and forward-thinking, fast-moving organization. And we've kind of I've oscillated back and forth on, is that a good thing or not? And I tend to lean towards, Joe had a really interesting point, that it is a good thing because, it attracts a specific type of employee, and then they, work well together. And really, I mean, it kind of separates, like, if you don't fit with the culture, you may not fit with the organization, and then those things kind of work harmoniously together. Not saying we're not a welcoming organization, but it takes a certain type of grit to work here, I think. Sure.
It does. And I would just qualify what I said about the pace is fast, but it's not like a hamster on a wheel.
Right.
There's purpose to it.
Right. It's moving.
Yes,
It's
moving
progressive.
forward. So that there's absolute purpose, which again I enjoy. I've been in lots of different organizations, some of them equally fast moving, but not so focused on their purpose.
Yeah.
So has all of your career been in public service, or what? I don't want to age you or anything like that.
Right.
I don't want to out you or anything, but Victor does have some years of experience. Obviously, you have enough years of experience to become an assistant city
Right.
manager. But what has your career been like? What have you done?
Right. So public sector or public sector adjacent. So even when I worked in the private sector, and I had my own consulting firm for a while, it was always in the public sector sphere.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started off life as an auditor. I always tell a story about my dad was a lion tamer and my mother was a trapeze artist. I ran away from the circus to become an auditor. It's not true, actually. My dad was a doctor.
I'm going to give my wife that joke, though, because she's an auditor, and I think she would really enjoy that.
Right. But then, like so many people, I found auditing too thrilling and became an accountant. So that was kind of my trajectory. But I joke about my parents, but in reality, they were both public servants. My dad was a doctor in the National Health Service back in the UK, and my mother was a nurse. My dad was also a politician, and I mean that in the sense of somebody who served for their community at a local level back home at a time when it was very difficult to do that. I grew up in Northern Ireland during...
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but Victor's not from here.
I'm not necessarily from East Texas, right? So I grew up during the Troubles, as we affectionately call a period of extreme,
which is an odd name for something that was so dangerous and volatile. I mean, that doesn't feel like an appropriate name for...
So we do understatement very well where I come from.
So, again, not to age you, I know, because I've done a little bit of research on this, just getting to know you a little bit better. And there are plenty of documentaries and docudramas and things like that about the Troubles. But it's shocking to realize how recent of history that is. Mm-hmm. So it went from the 60s to the late 90s, correct?
That's right.
And what, like when you were growing up there, what time frame? Was it 60s, 70s or?
So 70s, 80s were, I feel like, my formative years. I stayed back home in Northern Ireland. I went to Queen's University. So that was when I look back on, of course, your life's your life.
Right. You don't know.
And your experiences are just, every day to you.
Sure.
So I'm guessing probably not many 14 or 15-year-old young boys in Pearland, Texas, are used to checking under their father's cars for a car bomb every day.
I would hope none.
I would hope none too. Yeah. But that was an experience I had.
That is bonkers.
Yeah, and knowing that my mother was on tenterhooks in the evenings when my dad wasn't home from a meeting because he may not come home at all. As many of his friends and colleagues didn't.
God.
So, but again, your life's your life and your experience is your experience, so you don't think about it until afterwards. And I look back on that and think,
you're like, oh, that was...
Yeah, wow, that was... And I remember going with my dad to events, to political rallies, to things that now, my goodness, would I have taken my son when he was 10 or 12 to that? I don't know I would, but my dad did because he believed he was doing the right thing.
Yeah, and it was, all framed in that political sphere in that period of time and that geography. What a fascinating, and impressionable experience, I'm sure.
Yes.
I do have a very technical question. I don't know if I know how to ask this or if you know how to answer it, but like the first time somebody asked you as a teenage boy, like, hey, will you go look under my car for a bomb? Like, how is it? I'm sure it happened somewhere else in the neighborhood and you're like, oh, maybe we should look under our cars for bombs.
Well, we lived in the country on our own, and it was specific to my dad because he was on an IRA death list.
God.
And we knew of that, but we were told that.
And how did your dad handle that? Was he just like...
My dad was a giant, an absolute giant. When my dad would walk into the room and it would fill, and... I joke about this. My dad could kill a man from 100 paces with a glance. So he was that type of individual. So I look back and I think he soaked that all up. My mother, again, hugely courageous, just almost accepting of all of that and knowing that, she would support him. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was, when I look back on it now, it was formative. Of course, you don't think you've been formed at the time
Sure,
because you're
right,
just
yeah,
growing
yeah.
up. You're just a
Well,
child,
yeah.
and then you're a young adult, and then you
Think you know everything. and,
absolutely right. And as I said to my son, you should really move out now that you know everything.
I have a 13-year-old, so I'm starting to go with that. Like,
Right.
clearly, the person that's been keeping you alive this whole time, is an idiot.
Total. Yes, well, parents always are to their children. But yeah, it was a interesting. Now I think about it more, and part of it is, my son is growing up largely now. He's a firefighter, and he's got a young son who's not quite a year and a half. So he's now learning some of those feelings that particularly fathers have about their sons.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose, there's something to not knowing what you know until you know it. Like, I look at how I raised my children, and I look back at some of my dad's experiences and realize how ignorant I was, about a number of things. Right. And I can't, for whatever reason, impress that on my own children. I can't. They don't know my experience growing up, and so I'm giving them their own experience, and I can't impress on them how it's different from mine or how I'm trying to make a better life for them. Because it's always going to be there's always a generational loss there, and that's probably part of our evolutionary mechanism, part of probably what keeps us going and surviving. And because if we could remember all the things from the past, it might not be, I don't know. I just find it really fascinating that it takes experience to have that perspective, and you can't fake it. You just have to go through it and do it. Yeah. And then at the same breath, I also I hear about experiences like yours, or I grew up with a hunting friend who was a World War II Marine on the beach of Omaha, driving a Higgins boat. And that dude, he faced genuine trauma. And, me in my, plush little, job and house, and I've never experienced anything near some of the things that other people have experienced, and it's hard to look at the little inconveniences that I have that I feel angry about or whatever, and then go, it's really nothing. It helps to have that perspective.
It does.
Just like becoming a parent helps, I think, provide perspective.
It does.
So obviously, your come up probably, I would imagine, shaped who you are. Do you think is that part of what motivated you for civil service, or was it, what do you think?
So, as I say, my dad always gave to public service in many different ways, not just as an elected representative, but as a doctor, and he was very active in our local community as well. So I saw that growing up, and I guess it helped to form my view of what life should be about. So hence I found my way into government. Into local government specifically, because I always say it's at that local level that you touch the lives of people in a meaningful way every day. And you're not necessarily, I hope, tarnished by some of the opprobrium that attracts to people at the federal or the state level. And it's it's the same back home. So for us, federal is the national level, so the UK Parliament, so to speak, and then the state level is Northern Ireland has its own assembly, which we all despise. I think it's fair to say.
Fascinating.
But yeah, so it's similar in that respect. But yes, that helped form my view of what life should be about and what you should be doing. And I've worked in lots of different organisations, but generally in the public service. So worked back home in Northern Ireland, worked in England, and my last job before I moved to the United States in 2017 was to run a small island just 7 miles off the coast of France. It's British, but not part of the United Kingdom. So I was Chief Executive Officer of the island of Alderney, and that was fascinating.
So
Absolutely
it's its own
jurisdiction.
ecosystem.
It's in association with Guernsey, so it's one of the British Channel Islands, but it's British because it was part of Normandy. So when William of Normandy invaded England and took the English crown, he brought his lands and possessions with him. And over time, obviously, the remainder of Normandy became French, but those few islands remained with the British crown. So they're called to this day crown dependencies. In other words, they owe allegiance to the monarch, but they're not part of the United Kingdom, which is bizarre.
Fascinating.
But, yeah.
So how does that
history.
form of government work then? So you still pay a tax to the crown to,
So taxes are collected at the local level there. There was a relationship with the British government, and that was interesting to me just to have that, because I grew up, as I say, in Northern Ireland, where we were a part of the United Kingdom, albeit not everybody wanted to be, but some of us did, and
hence the troubles.
Hence the troubles, exactly. But it was just fascinating, and I've always been intrigued by history and what it can teach us, and some of it's not good.
Yeah.
So it was one of the other fascinating things about the Alderney and the Channel Islands generally is that it was occupied by Nazi Germany, and on the island of Alderney, which is a small island, 3 miles long, 1.5 miles wide, about 2,000 people live there on a good day. It is the only place on British soil where there was a Nazi concentration camp.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's still there.
Wow.
And all these fortifications around the island, first of all, developed during the Victorian era to fight an enemy that was no longer an enemy, France.
Right.
Yeah.
But they were developed then and used by the Germans when they occupied the islands for their fortifications. And during the Second World War, the entire population of the island of Alderney was evacuated.
Yep. Back to the main.
Either some of them went to England, some went to Guernsey, but the Nazis occupied the Channel Islands. So fascinating history.
And all of those fortifications have survived.
They survive to this day, and one of them,
My
one of them is where we used to go on a Sunday morning to our shooting club was based at one of the forts, and we used some of the places within the fort to shoot. So
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So how do you commute to and from the island? Is it by ferry only, or is there?
No, you fly. It's a little plane. It's like a 12, 14 seater. A lot of people have their private pilot's license as well, and some people have both. They have like their own yacht or motor cruiser and an airplane. So yeah. So
it's a pretty well-to-do.
It's a mix. There are some local people who aren't as well-to-do as some of the people that come generally from England and retire there.
I see.
So interesting place, fascinating history, lovely people. Really enjoyed our time there. We're there about 3 years, and then, as I say, we moved to the States in 2017. People say, "Why'd you do that, Victor?" Well, my wife's from Lubbock, Texas.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it was a move straight to Texas. It wasn't.
Still no. Initially to Oklahoma, because she is my wife is adult children who live there, and so in fact that's where she is this week. Back to see them. So we went there then, but the idea was always to get to Texas.
Gotcha.
Kind of for her coming back home.
So you're not from Texas, but you got here as fast as you could.
I got absolutely right. I'm about 300 years behind some of my ancestors who helped to create the state of Texas.
Really?
Yeah, some of them, because a lot of people came from what is now Northern Ireland. Of course, there was no such thing back then. It was Ireland, and many people came to the United States and migrated this direction.
Very cool.
Yeah. So there's a lot of connections. So a lot of people don't know this. They always talk about the Irish American experience and people with Irish roots. Many of them are actually like me, Scotch Irish, roots. So out of all your, what now? You're on 45 presidents, that is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's 21 of them have Scotch-Irish ancestry. One has Irish-American ancestry, which is, of course, JFK. But
Yeah.
there was a lot more who had the Scotch-Irish blood in them.
Yeah. I know we have a lot of Scottish in our family, just based on some limited genealogy that my sister has done. She traced us back to Clan McNabb.
Oh, really? You're a McNabb. Interesting.
Yeah, I need to go back and look it up again, but I forget how she got there. There was a French descendant, a Napoleon of some sort that came through Louisiana, and she was able to go back that direction.
Okay.
But with all the online genealogy stuff, I've been able to trace several lines back to the 800s, and they all, go back to Europe, basically.
Right.
But I find that stuff, I find it fascinating too, because we're sort of we've been in Texas since the 40s. And I just learned, I'm 42 years old. I just learned the other day. So my family was from Pennsylvania, Ohio area, and they migrated to Friendswood, because it was a Quaker community. And I guess assumed that they were Quakers up in Pennsylvania, Ohio, because, that's where Quakers lived. And my dad was like, no, they weren't.
Really?
Like, what are you talking about? He said they were Protestant or something like that. And I don't know how they picked Friendswood.
Crazy.
And then became
Quakers.
Quakers as a result of
Yeah.
it? Wow.
It was in 46. My grandfather was 10. They moved to Friendswood, and that was one of the only churches in Friendswood. That's how Friendswood was founded.
Yes.
By Quakers.
Right.
But how are you going to go from Lebanon, Ohio, to Friendswood, Texas? Like, that makes no sense to me. I'm glad they did. I appreciate my upbringing, but it's just wild to me.
Yeah.
So I've traced some of those lines back, and I enjoy the making all those connections, which is pretty fascinating.
So funny story. Do you know the origin of the name Hillbilly?
No.
Right. So back to the Scotch-Irish roots and what it is given to the United States. That's where the name came from. So you know that my first name is not Victor. I go by my second name, Victor.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So my first name is William. My father was William. My son doesn't go by William, but William is in his name and in his son's name.
Oh, wow.
So there is a William in every generation in our family, going back for as long as we can work out. So William was a commonly used name amongst people of, if you like, my ethnic identity back home. And historically, we used it as a term of affection for one another. So you would say so William became Billy, of course. And you're a good Billy, means you're a good guy, a good person. So when some of our people moved to the Appalachian Mountains and that area of the United States, other people would hear them talk to each other, and they would say, "Hey, Billy, hey, you're a good Billy."
Because it's just a common
and
nickname.
they go, "See, those folks that live in the hills, they call each other Billy all the time. You mean the hillbillies?"
Oh,
Them.
my gosh.
What?
Right. So you could say I'm a hillbilly.
That's very cool.
Amazing.
Right.
I did. There was something else. I know what I was thinking about. One other connection back to Ireland. It seems like. Are you familiar with the musician Steve Earle?
Yes.
Okay. There's his sort of genre of music, and I feel like I don't know how to pinpoint it. It's almost like a folksy,
Yes.
very poetic, sort of driven or charged music. And there's a bunch of them, like Guy Clark and who am I thinking of? Not well, Jerry Jeff Walker's another one too, but they all have, they sing about like Belfast a
Right.
lot, and they all have certain melodies that have a Celtic tune to them. Is there some sort of, what's the connection there? Is it
So music's a big part of my upbringing. I didn't maybe talk about that enough earlier, but yeah, we were all musicians in our family. And
you're a
and-
drummer.
Yeah, I'm a drummer.
Yeah,
That's right. And we have a long tradition of music. Music is a big thing for people on the island of Ireland generally, and so, for instance, bluegrass has its origins in Scottish and Irish traditional.
That makes sense.
folk music. It does. So we all played the fiddle and the fife and the accordion and all those types of instruments and the banjo, etc. And I think those all came with us.
Yeah.
When
To the Ozarks.
Absolutely right. And so it developed from there. But a lot of the roots kind of go back there. And there's a lot of overlap. People say, well, what do you prefer? Do you prefer Irish traditional music or Scottish traditional music?
Yeah.
To me, I just like music of all
all
types, and they all kind of blend together to a degree.
Well, and I mean, at least the stuff that I've been exposed to, especially like punk and things like that.
Right.
I mean, I think they appeal to me because they have a touch of rebelliousness.
So do
them.
you like Stiff Little Fingers?
I've never.
Right. Stiff Little Fingers, band from Belfast, 80s, late 70s, early
I need to
80s,
Google that.
punk band. Yeah, I do. Yeah,
Okay.
SLF, we call them. They have a really good song, Alternative Ulster.
Jasmine's
Because
looking
Yeah,
so
Jasmine
we
Woodruff.
talk about me coming from Northern Ireland, and that's the term that's used today.
Yeah.
But the more ancient term is Ulster, the province of Ulster. So when people say, "What are you?" I'm an Ulsterman.
Gotcha. That's fascinating. I'm not, really, I'm not from Ireland. I'm from here, but I've always felt like I've had a touch of a rebellious streak, and I've always given it to, Quakers because they're the same as far as like religious people. They're like, nah, we're going to do
Right.
we're not going to do the thing that you tell us to do. We're going to, like, they started the black market in Philadelphia because they're like, nah, we're not going to pay taxes. That's all right.
Yeah. Remember, taxation is just legalized theft. Let's be clear about that.
Oh man.
I've never heard it called that before.
It's on the
That
podcast.
is hilarious. Yeah. That's great. So one more question about your father. I've never had a doctor for a relative or anything, but does that mean y'all like never went to the hospital or anything?
Correct.
Yeah.
But virtually never. And to this day, I despise going to the doctor because I go, I just asked my dad, and he would, tell me there was something wrong, but rub a bit of dirt on it, and
Sure.
on you go.
Yeah. Move on.
Right.
Helps the immune system.
That's right.
That's amazing.
All right, I want to go back to the music. What is Victor listening to on a long car ride? Like, what's the go-to album, musician?
After the People of Pearland podcast.
Right,
obviously.
after listening to the podcast.
back to back, people are putting So that's a really good. So I have eclectic was the word that Josh and I were using earlier. So I have a very eclectic taste, wide ranging. I like to think. So have you ever heard of the Saw Doctors?
I have not.
Right. Okay. The Saw Doctors. They're an Irish band from Southern Ireland, but they have some cracking. So, funnily enough, I did a long road trip with my wife, and we listened to a lot of the Saw Doctors back in 2014. So they're good. Van Morrison, I like a bit of Van. So Van's from East Belfast. I lived in East Belfast for a time.
I didn't know that.
Right. And my friend that we used to play music together, and we actually started a rock band when we were at school. He went on to be a very successful musician. He used to play with Van Morrison. Wow. So when Van would come back to Belfast, my friend Mark would play with him. So I like that. Dire Straits, great band. I have to say, I don't get tired of listening to them. If you're going to ask me, do I ever listen to the Beatles? The answer is no. I detest it. Ask my wife. She knows I've broken more than one radio, and the Beatles come on.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. Okay.
And dare I say, another band. So I can probably talk about the ones I don't like more than the ones I like. So the other one I despise is REM. Never play Losing My Religion to me.
Yep. Yeah.
Was it somebody? Was it REM that they were talking about? I don't think it was REM. It's another band now. Golly, there's somebody that had a really unique, very complex. Oh, it was my cousin that was talking to me about this. And now I'm thinking about it. It might have been Radiohead that he was talking about. Somebody that had a very complex, like, music. Like they would change tempo 3 different times in a song, and they'd have 2 different instruments playing, like one playing 4/4 and another playing 6/8, all in the same time.
That sounds like Radiohead.
Radiohead's a good band. So I like Mumford and Sons, the earlier stuff of theirs, and here in the I like what you call them, Ratliff and the Night Sweats. I like Heart in the Hand. I like so some of the more modern stuff as well. So again, a mixture of stuff. I listen to radio a lot where they mix it up. So
great,
very
That's
cool.
Awesome. Mumford, the first Mumford album, that was just timeless.
Yeah,
I think
it was absolutely right. And then the other one I do when I have to get into that mood, but Old Crow Medicine Show,
Old Crow,
really good.
I was actually going to ask you specifically about them.
Yes.
Because the song Wagon Wheel.
Absolutely cracking song. Do you prefer theirs or the Darius Rucker?
Oh, definitely Old Crow Medicine
Old
Show.
Crow,
But do you know who started writing that song? Like somebody started.
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan.
Yes, yeah, that's right. They completed it. That's right, Bob Dylan. Yeah. So interesting. Another story. So the Southbound Train reference. Mm-hmm. So when I was a kid growing up, just as we were starting our band in the town I come from, there was another band at the time, and they called themselves Southbound Train after that reference.
Nice.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
I actually played a few gigs with them, I have to admit.
With Old Crow Medicine Show?
No, I wish I had. I wouldn't necessarily be here doing that. No, with Southbound Train back home in Ballymena. Yeah.
There's a documentary, 2015-ish, I want to say. It's Old Crow Medicine Show, Mumford and Sons, Edward Sharp.
Oh, right, Edward Sharp. Yeah.
They all did a tour where they hopped on a train, crossed across America.
Wow. It's a cracker.
And they did a documentary and it was fantastic. I mean, it's just a fantastic movie.
They have and there's, I think, is it a part, maybe it's at the end where they're all playing at the train.
Yes.
This train is bound for glory, that one, and they're all. I would suggest it's probably near the end of an evening where they've all been enjoying themselves.
Right. Oh yeah. That was a great movie. Right. Yeah, great documentary.
Yeah. I one time got tickets to a Steve Earle concert, and it's like one of those things. Adam, on my Spotify thing pops up like, "Hey, he's coming to." We lived in Dallas at the time, and so I was like, "Cool." Didn't even think twice about it. Just bought tickets because I want to see Steve Earle in concert, and how often does he come to Texas? And I didn't, like I said, pay attention to it at the time. And Deanna and I go to this thing, and it's at this old like theater, like traditional opera style theater called the Grand. I forget. Anyways, we show up, and it's like an NPR audience, and I was like, "This is not a concert audience. What is happening right now?" So we get our glasses of wine and we sit down, and it's musicians sitting on the stage. Steve Earle's in the middle, and Joan Baez is there, and John McMurtry, and a handful of other people. Yeah, it was a benefit for refugees.
Oh my goodness!
Like, I don't know how I missed all of that buying this thing, but I accidentally got us into like the most cultured date that we have ever been on, and it was a magical experience because it was just them and their instruments on the stage playing, songs about, immigrants and struggles in life and things like that. It was a wild experience. Cool. Looking back, I wish I could do more things like that. Yeah. I wish I knew how to find things like that because they're so fun.
That's cool.
So you've been in Texas now for a handful of years. Yeah. What do you do outside the office? What are your parts about Texas that you like? You like to travel around it?
Yes, I do. So I love road trips. Funnily enough, back in September, my wife and I, we did a road trip. Started off in New Mexico and drove down to Marfa
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
great.
And then across from Marfa through Alpine, across that way to San Antonio, and that was great fun. But
Yeah.
I like road trips. I have to say, this is the place to do them.
Did you spend any time in San Antonio?
Yes, and we love San Antonio. So my wife she lived there for a number of years. She was actually based at Fort Sam Houston for a time, and used to go and see her there. So yeah, San Antonio is one of our favorite cities to visit.
I think that is, I mean, other than Pearland, obviously, my favorite city in Texas. I love San Antonio. I'll go there every chance I get.
We believe in another life. Josh was born in San Antonio.
Yeah. I like to think that. And I like the whole city. I mean, the Riverwalk is great, but like South San Antonio, doing all the missions and things like that, I mean, it is magical.
Yeah.
But another life.
Another life, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe my next career, I'll be in San Antonio. Go visit my friends there. So what else do you do? What are your hobbies?
So a great question. What do I do? Unfortunately, don't do as much drumming as I'd like to. I have my drum kit set up at home, mind you, just in case.
Yeah. Need to do a jam session.
That's right. Plenty of room for it. But so don't get to play as much music as I used to. As I mentioned earlier, I've got a son, and him and his wife, they live up in Conroe, and they have a little boy called Callum. So that takes up quite a lot of time in a good way. So I like to spend time with them, and I really enjoy. I have to say that I really enjoy watching my son now becoming a father, and he and I talk a little bit about it. And he said to me something the other day. I forget exactly what the reference was, but talking about being a father to a young boy, and I just looked at him and I said, "Now you know how it feels."
Yeah.
It is interesting. I love my children. I have to qualify every one of my statements with one of those, but my oldest is a carbon copy, or at least from the time he was a baby until a certain age, he looked and acted like I could tell based on facial expressions what he was thinking, and and he makes, I mean, terrible choices like I do, just kind of mushy brained, and that it wasn't fair to him, because for a long time I'd like, I know what he's what he's going to do, or how he's feeling, whatever. And then at some point, he sort of matured to this point that it just clicked, like, oh, he is 100% his own human being. Like, I'm still getting, a taste of what my dad had to deal with.
Right.
And, fully deserved and justified,
Right.
But he has his own life experiences, his own, it's fun to watch from that perspective. And I'm sure it's great for my dad to watch and go,
it is. No, it's great. And so it's, obviously that takes up a lot of my time and energy, and I enjoy that. And then other than that, as you know, I like to read. Lots of different genres.
Yeah. What's your favorite genre, do you think, to read?
So probably in terms of fiction, crime fiction, particularly British crime fiction. I like to read about it. I like to watch it on TV as well. That would be my thing. And then again, I know you and I talk about books a lot. I like books that kind of lead you to think about things in a different way.
Yeah.
Back to the whole rebellious streak where I come from. We do that well, sometimes too well.
Yeah.
But it's always good to challenge not just other people but yourself.
Yeah.
And to have that ability to think again, which is of course one of the books we've talked about. Yeah.
I notice. I did my Enneagram thing last week, and I'm the enthusiast. The thing said, you enjoy new experiences and jumping from one thing to the next, and I'm like, well, that totally tracks, because I have, if I can't figure out a new or more effective way to do something, I'm not satisfied with it. You know what I mean?
Yes,
the status quo is unacceptable.
Oh, absolutely. I'm totally with you, and I've used this phrase over in different places, different times. But if it isn't broke, break it.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Sometimes
Yeah.
you need to, change is your friend, not your enemy.
Right.
But sometimes when you're in it, it's difficult to hang on to that. It's a lot of people feel threatened, and we, as you know, are going through a lot of transition. We talk about all the pace we move at, and we move at a fast pace, not to keep things all the same, but to change things for the better.
Yeah. I will say, just candidly, I am very good at breaking stuff. So my struggle is, making sure that I'm breaking it for the right reasons. And I think I'm getting better at that over time. But I mean, it's I've always enjoyed taking things apart and trying to make them better, or in some cases just put them back together.
Well, it's so funny. My mother still has the old vacuum cleaner I took apart when I was 7. Never got back together.
You didn't? Oh my goodness! So you've always been that way too, then I guess.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's amazing.
That's funny.
So we always like to ask on the show, your motivation, your why.
Right.
Mine, at least at work wise, in life in general, is probably to break stuff. If I'm being perfectly honest, I like to disrupt things, but at work, I love telling the stories of all of the great work that's done around here. So the community that raised me and made me who I am is inspired and engaged. Specifically, Joe and Josh Heiberger kind of came up with the People at Pearland podcast idea because we want residents and other employees and people like that to hear the voices and learn about the experiences of, all the great people that are literally making the community that they live in. So what's your, motivation? What gets you going and gets you up every day?
So, and I think it's something, again, we've talked about your why. So I think for most of us, our why changes over time.
Sure.
And depending what you're doing, it can be very, very, very specific, very broad. And I'd always say to people, it doesn't matter what your why is, as long as you have one. As long as you have you know why you're doing something, and that can be at the micro level and the macro level. And I tell the story, the old building of St. Paul's Cathedral. Sir Christopher Wren comes up the Thames in a barge and steps off, and there's 3 workmen working, 3 stonemasons, and he asks the first one what he does. He says, "Sir, I make a penny a day to look after my family." He says, "The second one, what are you doing?" "Sir, I make a firm foundation. I build thus so that the walls will stand firm over time." He says to the third one, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a cathedral for the greater glory of God." All 3 different whys. Is one better than the other? No, I'd say they're all valid.
Yeah,
Depends
and they're all producing the
precisely. They've all got purpose. So again, mine's morphed over time. I suppose to distill it down, what do I do now? So, good question. People ask me every day, "What do you do, Victor?" So
what do you think?
So what I think I do, what I hope I do, what I seek to do, is to help others, to serve others. I do anything directly myself? No. My job is fundamentally to support the directors that report to me, and all the people that report to them, all of you, all the people that actually provide those services to the people that rely on us and the people that we touch every day, hopefully in a productive way. So I like to say, what's my why? To serve, so that others may serve.
Yeah, that is the most succinct. That's the fewest number of words anybody has ever used in our organization to explain why, which is inspiring to me because I know you've thought about it to make it so succinct. You know what I mean?
So as Mark Twain said, "I'm sorry my letter's so long, I didn't have time to write a shorter one."
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting, especially as a professional communicator. The more I practice at it, the more I want to, whittle things down into very plain, straightforward language. There was a period of time where I like to be verbose, and
Yeah.
I do obviously like talking, but I'm still constantly working, and that's probably part of the challenge, piece is that always looking for efficiency gains, because there's always in communications, especially, and in how we talk about the things that we do. So that's really fascinating. I'm gonna have to use your example and figure out how to get other people to do that. Make it shorter.
Less is more.
Less
right?
is
That's
more
right.
precisely.
Less is more.
Right.
Very cool. Any other thoughts, closing comments, snide remarks?
The only other question I was kind of thinking, and your why kind of answered it for me in a way, but the difference or the similarities of serving at the local level here versus in your previous experiences.
Good question, yeah.
But, to me, it just sounds like it's just service. That's really the key point of it, right?
Yeah.
It is, and people have asked me, what's different? Oh, the UK must be so different from Texas. So things are different, much is the same. And I've always enjoyed working, as I said earlier, at that local level, at touching people in a hopefully a positive way. And maybe not always, we can always do better. And not all of our customers want to be our customers, and we need to remember that. So we need to serve them too. But yes, it's always been fundamentally about that. And I like, to that end, I also like living in the community that I serve. I think that gives you the opportunity to, first of all, you experience it for yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we are very glad you're here. You're a fantastic addition to our organization and the community.
Yeah.
So we're going to take your encouraging words to heart and work in service of others. And as a Pearland resident, if you need anything, just
I know who to call.
reach out. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And we will see you next episode. Bye.